Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Sylvia Ward. Thanks for joining us and welcome to today's webinar presented by Applicaster and Jump. Tonight's topic is about how to differentiate your OTT business to attract loyal subscribers. And we got two experts joining us today, Mark Adams and Eric Cullen. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Mark Adams here. I'm based in Redwood City, California, running business development sales for Jump. Thanks for joining everyone. Looking forward to today's topic.
And I'm Eric Cullen. I'm Director of Business Development. I work on partnerships at Applicaster. I'm based about 20 miles north of Mark in San Francisco.
Well, we can start with the presentation.
Fantastic. So let me start by just briefly introducing Jump. So for those of you who don't know us, we're a data management platform for video service providers. We're 100% focused on that segment. And essentially our tool is focused on optimization of retention. So really getting good engagement with your customers, giving them a personalized experience and making sure your marketing is effective. And we do it all through machine learning and AI. We've been around for about 3 years and have a really strong presence in terms of customers in the Latin American region and Europe, and we're just starting to expand in the US, but some very large and well-known brands give us a aggregate subscriber base in the several millions, which is really helpful for our machine learning models. So, a lot of people make claims about data. I mean, when you have a data business, you don't really have anywhere to hide. People can see if your product works or not. And, when customers deploy us, our data tells us that, they've been able to reduce churn by 15 to 30%. Churn, I think, if you're running an SVOD business, is the #1 issue that you're facing. I mean, I have heard numbers from 30 to 50% in terms of churn, which means, it's a leaky bucket that you have to keep filling. And if you can reduce churn by 5%, let alone 15 or 30, then you've made a huge impact on your business. Getting people to stick around is really a function of getting them to consume your content. So making sure that they have a lot of engagement with the content that they want is there, and increasing that by 25 to 75% certainly increases your retention. And then running specific marketing campaigns. I mean, you have a lot of data, you want to be able to use that in your retention acquisition campaigns, and we've found to be able to increase the effectiveness by 10 to 50%. We'll dive into some of the underlying methodology after this in a second. So, Eric, why don't you introduce us to Applicaster?
Thanks, Mark. So Applicaster is a leading app lifecycle management platform. And that may be a new term for some on the line, but I think it fits our solution well. We help media companies and development agencies build and iterate cross-platform apps. So the idea is not just to ship it once and leave it static, but keep the app vibrant for the life of it. So our platform really does support the rapid relevancy of apps across mobile, streaming players, and smart TVs. You can see some of those logos down below. And we've been helping our customers in their apps for more than 10 years, and we've invested more than $30 million into our core platform. We've launched more than 1,500 apps across the world, and those apps have reached hundreds of millions of users. So we do have a fair amount of experience in this space. And our customers, as you can see in the middle box, include some of the largest media companies around the world, like Fox, DirecTV, Hearst, Tribune, ProSieben. And we have customers across a wide range of verticals. So we also have sports and lifestyle and kids and even dogs. We have a customer, Dog TV, where dogs watch TV. So many niches represented in the space that we serve. And partners, which is the area that I cover, is an essential part of our platform. And I'm not just saying that as the partner guy. We have the largest and broadest marketplace of solutions. These are solutions that are repurposable from one project to the next. And they're basically plugins within our ecosystem, and that power the media apps, and it's a huge differentiator for us. And
that's fantastic. Yeah. So Eric, there's some pretty good numbers there. $30 million, 10 years, 1,500 apps, hundreds of millions of users. You must have a pretty good idea of the best practices, right, for application lifecycle management with all that experience. I mean, from what I understand, it's based on an approach of planning through maintenance and iterating on that. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, that's right. So what we're seeing right now in this slide is kind of like a little city where our platform sits in the city center, and surrounding it are the various services and elements of the modern media app. And when you think about the types of solutions or services that a media company is going to need, it can be well over a dozen, if not 2 dozen, different third-party services that come together to form really what powers the app. So it could be something like analytics and insights, loyalty and retention, which Jump obviously does a fantastic job. We could talk about the design elements. We talk about the CDN, the content management system, advertising, subscriber management. So there's quite a bit that you really need to bring into your app to be effective. And that's what our marketplace, which is what I help run, provides at Applicaster. It's this ecosystem of plugins. And one thing I do want to call out here, and it's kind of on their left side, is the design element. So one thing that makes our platform unique is this plugin architecture. Everything within our platform is a plugin, and that includes the design elements. So we give our customers a series of templates so they can start out quickly and pick a template that gets them either all the way or most of the way there. But then other custom screens are just plugins in our world. And so if you need a custom weather screen, or if you need a special UI for a sports project that you're working on, or maybe it is a sports app and you need something custom that doesn't quite fit one of the templates, that just becomes another plugin. It's manageable, it's repurposable. And so the idea is to have this modular architecture that allows you to swap things in and out and to stay vibrant.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it takes a long time to launch an app, doesn't it, Eric? It takes about 9 months or 12 months or something, or is there another methodology that Applicaster uses to get to market faster?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that the traditional way that apps, and probably still the dominant way that apps are being built today, and certainly if you consider all types of apps, are that they're done by a developer. And it's a slower process because they're coding and they've got to write code for each platform. A few years ago, templated solutions came in that would do everything. They would have their own content management system, their own payments, probably their own advertising, and they would give you a few templates to work with. And that did help companies to launch faster, certainly much faster. The problem was the template is very rigid. And so a serious media company that needs to iterate, well, if they need to make a change that's not part of that platform, well, now they're on a product roadmap and they've got to beg and turn in screws, whatever, to get that platform, that templated solution to make the modification that they need. And so at the end, they can't stay relevant, and they end up, if there's often a serious company, they have to go back to the custom code or choose a solution like ours that's really based on rapid relevancy and iteration.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, one of the things that, I think is so critical today in any kind of consumer business, quite frankly, not just video apps, but it is the data element. And if we're talking about managing a life cycle from the planning through the maintenance phase, our view obviously at Jump is that you need to be planning data from day one. It's not just an afterthought and something that, you've been in market for 3 months and suddenly you need to get a data strategy going. So I just wanted to, give you an example of an application data architecture that, I think we use. And really the name of the game is to support this application lifecycle is pull in as much data as you can from various sources. Now, the modern way to warehouse data is in a data warehouse or data lake, which is simply a bunch of unstructured data that, you know, is clumped together from different sources. And what I'm talking about here, the most relevant things are the content catalog itself, the commerce events, so transaction and SVOD and any other EST that might be happening, the playback activity from the player itself, the UX events, which is super important, and that's the topic we're going to get to in a sec, QoS sources, customer service ticket, all that kind of stuff is very, very valuable. It's not just what happens on the app itself, but it's across the whole gamut of data that you're collecting. And, you know, I think it's one of the most valuable assets that you have as an OTT business. And if you want to differentiate your customers, you should know more about them than anyone else. And, you know, the best way, in our opinion, to do that is structure it in this kind of fashion. So you have a whole bunch of data. Data's fine, but, you know, you need to be able to tell you things. And the way to do that is run a bunch of queries on it. We use various AI and machine learning tools to basically not only understand the customers in a really deep way, but make predictions about what they're going to do. Knowing something about the customer before they do is super powerful and allows you to really optimize your marketing, make sure the right content's put in front of them. You know, just basically get issues before they happen, right? So we've created a dashboard that sits on top of all your data. You know, you also can put a client on the app. I mean, you know, most apps are, you know, pretty client intensive right now with all the SDKs they have in them, but, you know, you're probably collecting, if you're a, you know, medium or large OTT business, you're probably collecting the data anyway in somewhere, and wherever it is, we'd love to get in it and mine it. You know, we clean it up and really give you some interesting insights. And it's not just the Jump tool, but, you know, we also do marketing campaigns with Firebase and MailChimp and Airship and things like that as well, which we can talk about in a second. But and we could also sit alongside other data analysis platforms like Tableau if you have a data science team on board that's you know, really into that kind of stuff. You can perform all kinds of analysis. I mean, I think the issue with data is most businesses don't suffer from a lack of data. Quite frankly, they have more than enough. It's just really finding it, managing it, and getting it to tell you the story that you need to know. And that's, you know, where tools like this are really handy, and it goes back and supports that whole life cycle. So this is a day one planning activity, because, you know, as Eric said, once an app is launched, that's not nearly the end of it. That's really just the start, because you need to keep people, you know, engaged with that app for as long as you can. So did you have any other comments on that, Eric, before we go to the next topic?
No, I think it's interesting to see this slide, and what makes me think about experimentation. And what's the value of experimentation in a data strategy in your mind, Mark? Yeah,
that's really interesting, and it goes kind of into our next topic as well. So, I mean, if you look at the data you get around, for example, UX performance, right? So I would learn a whole bunch around how people are moving through my app, how they're getting to free content, how they're getting to paid content, how they're signing up, how they're looking at the other features you have. And you know, we're counting the number of clicks, the number of interactions it takes, right? So it might take you, you know, 7 user interactions to get through to the free content on your Android, and only like 4 on your PS4 or whatever. So there's all these different variables or metrics you're getting from each of your different platforms. And as you mentioned, Eric, there's a whole bunch of different platforms out there. So you might have a baseline of, like, you want people to be watching content in 5 clicks or less. So if you don't have that, then you want to be able to experiment, run A/B tests, and find a way that people are getting that content surfaced to them as possible. I mean, I think user experience is fantastic, and there's a lot of innovation done in that over the last several years. But I think ultimately people just want to be able to watch content as quick as they can and enjoy the content in a full screen environment. They don't want the UX to get in the way necessarily. They want it to support them. They want to be able to sign up easily. They want to be able to register and start playing back, you know, instantly, essentially. And they don't want to be able, and they want to be kind of familiar. I know every platform is kind of different and has different rules around, you know, the buttons and keystrokes and stuff that you use. But, you know, I'm sure there's there's standards you can put in place. But I mean, on that note, Erica, I mean, are all UXs the same, or is it possible to differentiate, and move away from that templated experience?
I think it's important to move away from that templated experience if you have a good reason to. And I think if you need to launch quickly and just get something out, you could rely on a template for a little while. But once you hone in on how you're going to impact your audience, and that's obviously a mixture of content and experience, then you've got to move quickly to create the experiences that are going to engage them. And I think that great apps are really a blend of content and experiences. You can say, the navigation doesn't get in the way. I could also say that the navigation helps to improve the content experience. When I see apps that are very static, as opposed to kind of what Netflix is doing, where when you go to when you thumb over one of the thumbnails, or mouse over one of the thumbnails, you see the preview right away. And I think that kind of pulls you into the content. It gives you a little more information for a user. So I think it is the blend of those two, and then also being able to be timely. So if you have a big event coming up, how do you promote it within your app? Do you want to should it take over part of your app? And to do that, you do have to move quickly, and you have to have the foundation in place to take advantage of those timely opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a dynamic UX is really critical. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, right? It can't be fixed, and you can't be wedded to a development cycle that takes 3 months to push out an update if you want to take advantage of that.
That's right.
So, Eric, just putting you on the spot here, who's got the best looking UX in the world right now? Could be Applicaster, could not be.
I do think Netflix I think Netflix has done a lot right. I mean, I think Best, you could argue, is the most successful, and I think they've been incredibly successful. I mean, and what I think is well known within the industry is that this is an experience that's been driven by data and powered by it, and they have a huge advantage in terms of the data that they've collected. They were in business with DVDs years before they launched the streaming. And they put, I think, an incredible data strategy together, and they learned from it. And they made some mistakes. There were times I remember looking at Netflix, wondering why they were hiding content. They were so good at hiding the content that I wanted to find. But I think they got better over time, and now it feels a lot more natural.
Yeah, it does. I think data is the key. And I think, as you said, Eric, I mean, the winner of the best goes to whoever gets you the content that you want to watch on the device you want as quickly as you want. I mean, that's really what people think about. They don't want to have to struggle through a bunch of screens. Data makes the content available for them, with pretty good accuracy, I think, about what they want to watch. And it's there, and it's just, as we say, it's got autoplay now, which I think is one of the most interesting things in recent years. The content just starts playing, whether it's
right.
a trailer or the show itself, which I think is really cool. And, I think that it really depends on, probably your age group and your usage style as well. So if you're primarily a millennial and you're on the phone all the time, I think you probably want a TikTok style experience. Mm-hmm. What I'm really interested in seeing is Quibi, actually, when that comes out. I want to understand that user experience, and that's going to be interesting. If nothing else, it's going to be really cool. But then, people slightly older generation just want to watch it on the Roku and lean back and not be troubled by too much interaction. But in terms of the content personalization, so you can personalize your user experience, but you want to optimize content in a personalized and engaged way. I mean, what's the Applicaster view on that, Eric, in terms of optimizing your content personalization and engagement?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to employ. Being able to tailor the content to the audience is critical. You don't want to constantly be showing your audience, who has a very limited attention span, content that's not relevant to them. And I think part of it is putting the system and putting the right data strategy and personalization strategy in at the offset, and not trying to put it in years later or months later, starting at the right time.
Yeah.
which is pre-launch to really have these things in place so that you're learning from your audience on day one, and you can train a model to be a good solid foundation.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to know how content recommendation works for your client Dog TV.
Yeah, we listen to we listen to the amount of barks that it's getting, and I don't know how it works for them, but yeah, it's a very good question. Many jokes could be told about that.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone else, the human viewers, like I said, we capture a whole bunch of data. And one thing we learned, when you have a big enough user base, you start to discern, really, really interesting trends and patterns. And one of the things you understand about a user is as they go through their day, they're watching content on different devices, and different devices might mean a different genre of content and a different viewing style. So lean back and lean forward. So if you say cycle through the week, so it's Tuesday when I get home from work tonight, lean back and watch something on, on Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or, one of the shows, and, that's fine. It's just more of a relaxing lean back style. But, say I live in New York and I'm commuting to work on the subway, maybe I'm leaning forward and watching on my mobile. I want shorter form content. I want something that maybe is a little bit more interactive. And, this is where, like I said before, Quibi might be really interesting with 10-minute episodes. I mean, that's just perfect for commuting and other kind of snackable breaks. But I mean, just getting that full picture of that user over 7 days of how they, and what they watch on the weekend is different to during the week. And people could be using 3 or 4 devices, mobile, iPad, Roku in the bedroom. They might have a console that they're watching stuff on, and each of that, people are watching by themselves as well as in groups. I mean, we can't tell exactly if it's a bunch of people watching or not, but, for example, sports is something where a lot of people tend to be watching, in teams rather than
Certainly.
Solo. But yeah, if you look at the screen here, so I've just got, this is, we can really drill down to, content by various set-top boxes and all the other different, all the different platforms out there. I mean, it's crazy the number of platforms, but, each of them might have a slightly different profile and a slightly different use case, which means that you personalize content for them differently. I mean, that's really the bottom line. So I'm more likely to be recommended a bunch of stuff that's suitable for, 8:30 a.m. commuting to work versus 9 o'clock at night relaxing. It's just, understanding that level of data really helps you. And it also helps you cluster around people. So, you have a bunch of people in what we call a taste community. So they might like a specific sporting team or league. They might like a specific genre or show. It must be really, it must have been easy at Disney Plus. There was a whole heap of people who were in the Mandalorian cluster, right? So that was very easy to keep them engaged, keep them coming back every week. But then once Mandalorian finishes, well then, you got a whole bunch of people at risk of churning. And what can you do about that? Well, then you need to recommend them something pretty quickly and keep them engaged still so they don't churn out.
I think that's exactly right. I think they've got a challenge on their hands. That show was such a hit. How do they follow that? It's a good point.
Yeah, I haven't seen the most recent numbers. I mean, I know it's doing extremely well. I mean, all of it seems to be doing pretty well. But yeah, I think the churn's going to be super interesting when that happens. And I know Apple didn't break out specific numbers for their service, but again, their key business is hardware with a bit of software thrown into services, right? But Disney and Netflix are pure content businesses, so I think they have different goals. And then Amazon itself, of course, has got a completely different strategy. But look, one of the things that is key, as I mentioned, when you have a group of people at risk, is really getting the right marketing message to them. When you can predict ahead of time when they're likely to churn, then you can actually put in some pretty effective campaigns. So from an Applicaster perspective, Eric, what's your views on just enhancing, marketing in general, right? And, I can talk about the data piece of it, but yeah, let's hear.
Yeah, I think it's to take advantage of the tools that are out there. So, They could be a push notification provider. And there's some sophisticated ones. There's partners that we have that are plugins within our ecosystem that I've seen and I've heard from customers anecdotally that have had an impact on their business. How are you messaging the audience? And I think push is a powerful one. The fact that you can be on your phone and get a notification that, you know, a new episode has dropped. I mean, that's a great way to retain loyalty. You want to bring those viewers back into your platform, and communicating to them is critical. There's also in-app messaging, and that's another great tool. Obviously, you can send email campaigns, but I think there should be a constant flow of relevant messaging to your audience. And so you don't want to overwhelm them. That's a great way for someone to sour on your brand. So you have to be selective. You have to be targeted. But I think if you can do it in a targeted, not super aggressive way, but tactical and intelligent, then I think you'll see positive results. And that's what we've seen across our customer base.
Yeah, I mean, I always found I like getting the push notification once a week from Netflix about new content. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's unobtrusive. You know, it sort of comes around Friday afternoon, so they're, you know, anticipating people gearing up for the weekend, watching a bunch of content. Great, there's a new season of Trolls, which is what I normally get. My kids watch my account, but I mean, I think it's, and I've actually discovered shows that way. I think push is really interesting. You know, I don't know if push notification, if that again is a cohort or generational specific thing, if people are more open to it or not, but with the right kind of data strategy, you can certainly tell. You know, I think the ability to be able to generate marketing campaigns like Push or like Firebase or MailChimp or whatever on the fly when you see issues happening is super key. So we've got the slide I have now here is say you've set some criteria for what, you know, a churning customer might look like, or someone who's at risk of churn. And we've got a couple of categories here: the top risk, which is 5% of this population, high risk and low risk. And you know, there's dozens of different variables that go into making this, but it could be like the length of time since they last engaged, just fired up the service. Could be how many minutes per day they're watching. It's patterns like that flag us to say, okay, there's a bunch of risk. There's 5% of my base right now who are actually at risk, and we need to do something about it. And be able to drill down on that and then generate a marketing campaign instantly is fantastic. So, you know, okay, Mandalorian's finished, but there's a whole bunch of Marvel and Obi-Wan series and whatever else coming just next month. So stay engaged. In the meantime, we've just added Force Awakens. Fantastic. You need to get that message out there so they don't churn and they stay engaged, and you give them a reason to come back to your service. And that's all well and good. Being able to run those services is fantastic, but it's also measuring the effectiveness of it as well. Like I said at the outset, I mean, as a data analysis company, there's nowhere to hide, right? So either it's effective or it's not. So you run a campaign with a specific cohort, you generate that list in Airship, the notifications go out, and you see the results. You come back in 4 weeks and those customers are still there or they're not. And you can constantly refine that model. You know, I think the secret of reducing churn and getting it under control and increasing engagement is actually constantly refining and looking at that message. And of course, it takes a bit of data to do that. You can't just switch it on day one and then churn drops by 10%. Mm-hmm. It normally takes, you know, 30 to 90 days or 60 to 90 days, I'm sorry, of understanding, you know, user patterns and, you know, really, you know, every service is specific and unique and has its own set of content and challenges and business model. So really understanding all those variables, then, you know, at day, say 90, you can actually start to make pretty accurate predictions around who's at risk. And the other thing is, of course, then you leave the not at risk people alone. If you've got a bunch of people who are happy and they're watching 75 minutes a day, then you just leave them alone. You know, you have a different strategy with those people. You want to keep them engaged, but it's not as urgent, and you have different messaging. But for the guy who hasn't been on there for the last 30 days, and you know he's probably about to hit cancel in, you know, the Apple iTunes, he's going to say, well, there's really, really interesting content that is based on my viewing habits. It's just targeted for me, and there might be another retention offer. It might be in month 3 or sign up for another 12 months, and you get a bonus month or something. One thing I wanted to ask you, Eric, was about just the business models in general. I've seen, so obviously in the subscription world, month to month is pretty common. It's probably obviously the most common, but I have seen a trend, particularly in sports, for annual payments. Like I think DAZN and another couple of the other niche sport providers I subscribe to do annual versus, and you get a discount obviously, but annual versus monthly. Have you seen any trends or data on that?
Yeah, I can't say that I'm super versed in the subscriber, what subscription packages are working, but I can, there is something that I'm more of an expert on, and that's that I see them changing. And
right, yeah.
One of the, we have sports customers, kids, all sorts of SVOD media companies, or at least their apps are SVOD, and they sometimes will decide they should experiment with AVOD and do a combination, and they're constantly changing their subscriptions. They may have special carve-outs within their apps for to cut up their offerings. And the thing that I've seen, and I'm curious if you've seen the same thing, that media companies, they tend to have a general idea of where they want to go with their content, their brand, the app, the experience, and then things change from the very first day as the data comes in, and ideally they're getting the right data. And I'd love to talk about, what are those core data, what are the core elements of a data strategy, and kind of when do you put that in? But once the rubber hits the road, we always see pretty dramatic changes that are necessary in terms of tuning into that audience and identifying opportunities for growth and threats that might take away the audience.
Yeah, well, I think 2020 is a year of experimenting with business models. I think that, one of the more interesting moves is Netflix in India with their $2.75 per month mobile only plan. I think that's super interesting. We look at Peacock, which is coming next month, and they have, I want to say at least 3 different tiers of completely AVOD, and then there's 2 levels of premium as well, which is super interesting. So, and then, you have various bundling strategies, like a lot of the early Apple and Disney Plus sign up, of course, has come from being bundled with devices, which is really interesting as well. And then, of course, you've got the annual versus subscription. And I think that it will shake out, but I'm actually encouraged to see the experimentation. It's not just one size fits all. Okay, it's just $12 a month, or this is $5 a month. But one of the services that I'm interested in, because it's a niche sport which I can't watch anywhere else in the US, is the Australian Rugby League has a service which is $17 a week, which is super expensive, about $49 a month, or $149 per year.
So which subscription are you going to buy?
Good question, actually, because the thing with annual subscriptions is the season only goes for 16 weeks. So, yeah.
One thing.
So we're just starting. Oh, sorry, Eric, did you have another comment?
Oh, no, I just, I think one thing that might be worth highlighting is this idea of the app lifecycle management and talking about the stages. I think that's something that is maybe not thought out by every media company that I've seen, and oftentimes they kind of stop at launch, and there's so much focus going into getting it live and not into making it successful. I think we might actually have a slide on that if we could spend just a minute looking at it. I think that it's certainly the heart of what I have to share. If we go, there we go. Yeah, that's it, exactly, yeah. So what I just wanted to share with the audience is that it's essential to own your own destiny in your app, and it really is a life cycle. It's not enough just to get to launch, and unfortunately, and I see even with large media companies that they're so focused on getting the app out the door, and there is a lot of work that goes into that. But what happens after the app ships? And I think with Jump, it's a really you certainly have a lot to offer on this, where what I've seen is oftentimes the data strategy comes in late, and they're already a couple months, maybe more down the road, and they really don't understand their audience, and they're seeing churn. And you can play catch up, or you can start with that strategy right off the bat. And so I think that there's really three things you want to do after you launch, which is you're focused on growth, you're focused on monetization, and then maintaining relevance. And there are going to be things like, they're just going to be part of having an app out there, that you're going to have updates. So every time your every platform that you're on, every plugin that is part of your overall package of services, they're going to ship updates from time to time. So you've got to maintain that. And that sounds, it's not the most exciting thing, but if you don't do it, you're going to lose out on capabilities. And if you really don't do it, you could end up with an app that's unusable. So you've got to have the mentality that you're going to be maintaining this app, and that's part of what makes it vibrant. And then the next thing is data. It's finding those opportunities and capitalizing on them. And I mean, Mark, do you agree with that? That you've seen customers that have maybe put in a data strategy a little bit late?
Every business is in the data business now, right? So if you don't have a data strategy from day one, your product isn't fully formed yet. I mean, that's really how the world works in 2020. So I mean, I think data is just so essential, and should be, you know, when everyone is at the whiteboard planning stage, data should be front and center. Just in the couple of minutes we have left, or a few minutes we have left, I'd like to take some questions from the audience, and we've got a whole bunch of people watching today. It's fantastic, and a couple of really interesting questions. So Eric, there's one for you here around sport brands, actually. So how do you think sport brands are going to adapt their user experience to engage fans and users? I think sport's been one of the most innovative services, right, in terms of UX?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the biggest ways they're doing it, we keep talking about data, but it's having real-time game data from stats providers. So it could be someone like Opta/StatsPerform or Nielsen. Those are two partners of ours. And that offers a ton of great capabilities within an app. You can see a game and you're getting the data that's relevant to the games, and you can scroll and look at scores from other games. You can see who's leading in the league. And I think that getting all that data together, you need a data source partner to do that within your app, but that's a real fan experience where you can be, you can be kind of a student of the game and understand who's leading in particular categories, and you can look at schedules. Maybe you can even buy tickets. And so I think bringing those things with data and then purchases is also a great thing. If you can sell tickets from your app or merchandise, having that kind of commercial element, those are things that I think are keeping people engaged and generating more revenue.
Yeah, I love tickets and merch in sporting, and as much, you can't have too many statistics either. I mean, do you think this will be the year that there's some sort of, widespread AR experience? I mean, I won't even ask about VR, but I mean, I think there's been a couple of innovations around augmented reality. When's it going to hit mainstream?
Yeah, it might this year. I feel like a lot of people are still watching their sports teams on their apps and on their TVs in a traditional standpoint. So I think it's a little bit early from that, but I guess time will tell.
Yeah. I've got a really interesting question. Probably a lot of people in studio offices around the country are thinking this, actually. So anonymous attendee says, how do you get customers from free to subscribed users? and the getting people to convert is, of course, the name of the game if you have an SVOD services. I've noticed the free windows have been getting shorter and shorter. Mm-hmm. There's no 30 days free anymore, right? You've pretty much got to subscribe. Maybe there's 3 days or 7 days, or if you've bought a device and, it comes bundled with your iPhone or whatever, you get it for a year. But, how do you get people to convert? Well, you get them to convert from trial to paid. Just, essentially your product is very key, like having the content that you want to watch, making sure it's personalized as possible, during that, customers, you might only have 3 or 7 days to get to know them and understand them. So you have a very, very limited window to figure out what they like, especially if they come in for one piece of content, like one show. But you take as much data as you can, and you develop an offer, an acquisition, or conversion campaign to suit. I mean, that's all you can do. But I mean, it's really the hot button issue of this year with the streaming wars.
And Mark, do you see a correlation between engagement and how much time that the users spend watching and their likelihood to convert to a premium package?
Yeah, Eric. I mean, that's one of the biggest red flags we see. Is minutes spent per day, or number of plays, or hours. I mean, there's a number of different ways to slice it, but basically, how much time are you spending in my service? And if it goes from 72 minutes a day down to 0 minutes a day, or 5 minutes a day, then you have an issue. So that's one of the things we give most weight to in terms of assigning a risk profile to that particular subscriber as well. You're not on my app very much, something's gone wrong. Either you don't know about the new content, or you don't think there's something that you want. Here's a question. It's an interesting one. You guys have covered a lot of XVOD service scenarios, like AVOD, FVOD, SVOD. Interested to see how you see applying data-driven experiences to live sports and esports. Yeah, live's an interesting one. I think the most valuable content in the world is live content. Quite frankly, aside from the tentpole Disney, Marvel films, live sports is the most valuable content by far. And what you were talking about, Eric, just now about the data experiences, I think is a way to do it, and applies to esports as well. I mean, I mean, sports are interesting because you have that person for a particular season, that there might be 16 games in a season that they're going to follow their team and show up for. If you have things in your offerings in your service that go beyond sport, that they're just there to watch, because they're a Liverpool fan, so they're going to watch all the Liverpool games, and when the season's done, are they going to go away? They're going to watch something else, right? So I think the challenge is, people are there for the live events, but how do you keep them through the rest of your service? Because you don't want them to be just there for that. You want them to be there year round. So they might have a summer sport that they watch as well, or just other content. But I think the ability to do in-match statistics, probably depending on your jurisdiction, in-match gambling as well. It's going to be huge in data, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's massive. Massive in certain markets that allow that kind of stuff. So
yeah, the other thing I'd say is, how immersive can you make that live experience? And one thing that we've seen a uptick in is chat, and integrating that into the live viewing and connecting with other fans.
Yeah, that's of course the esports scenario. That's, I guess, fundamental to that whole experience, is chatting with, as players chatting, and as the audience chatting as well. It's super important. I think got time for one more question. Just seeing how we're going here. So, this is another classic question that I've been asked a lot over the years. So, and it happens in my house. So, given more content is viewed on a large screen with multiple members in the house, how do we, that's Jump, manage the AI to identify who might be watching and how relevant the recommendation might be? I don't want to watch Scooby-Doo when I'm watching at 10 o'clock, even if I've been watching Sesame at 5 o'clock. And that's key. So this touches on a number of things, right? So data privacy is really essential. And, unless you log in specifically, well, your 10-year-old's not going to log in as them. It's always going to be under the adult's account, right? So you're never going to know exactly who's watching, but you can have a pretty good idea based on, the content genre. So if they're watching family movies and Trolls, and I'm just trying to think some of the things that are on our house every day, but, Scooby-Doo's a big one as well. Then you can understand, at a high level and a privacy protecting level, that there might be two different types of content. And that goes back to what I said before about matching content with time of day and device. Because your kids might be watching it on the iPad, right? They're watching Scooby-Doo, but you're watching The Crown or something on on the Roku in the lounge room. So, you know, there are ways to infer who might be watching, but, you know, you can never know exactly. And, you know, it's another point, like all the data we collect is our customers' data. I mean, it's completely anonymized and aggregated, and, you know, we, you know, always respect the privacy laws in all the jurisdictions we work in. So it's just a matter of, you know, using data science to infer who might be watching and go from there and make recommendations. But I mean, it still gets messed up occasionally. I mean, I still get recommendations for trolls and stuff from Netflix. Just it's one more here from Darcy. How do you see data in real time versus VOD or longer term subscriber retention issues? Yeah, so the data itself in real time, I mean, we see that. Of course, you can drill down at any moment and get up-to-date data. I mean, I don't think that's really an issue. I'm not sure if Darcy's referring to real time, like live content, because she's got real time versus VOD or longer term subscriber reviews. But, you know, I think that getting access to the data in real time is not a problem. I mean, we have all kinds of reporting and that you can make literally on the fly marketing decisions about. So that's pretty easy to handle. So I think we're just about in terms of questions. Let me just check. We've had fantastic attendance. I really want to thank everyone for coming and spending part of their morning or afternoon or evening with us. It's been really, really good. Let me see. So we are going to, there'll be a recording of this webinar available for people to watch, and I think some people might be even getting the PPT. So in conclusion, Eric, did you want to make any final comments on what we've been talking today? I think it's been a really great discussion. I've actually learned quite a bit.
I just say I've enjoyed it greatly. I've learned a little bit about data strategy and when to implement it, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah, look, I think that the key thing to remember about differentiating your service is, you know, data is essential, and quite frankly, it never stops. It's work that always has to be done. Like on day one that your services launch, it's already getting old, right? So you need to be planning like a constant updating cycle, constant personalization, constant experimentation, as we're seeing. And it's going to be like, you know, when we have another conversation about this at the end of the year, to see how all the different business models and players have turned out, quite frankly. So yeah, it's super interesting. But yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you know, I think that you're right. And actually, I should make the point that, yeah, I think that it's flexibility, and I think it's looking at the data and seeing what it says, and then being able to rapidly take actions. I think that that's kind of the marriage of data and what's a solid platform to implement those changes. I think that the combination of those two empowers you to learn and then you know, address your audience.
That's fantastic. That's a great place to leave off. Flexible with data, and that's how you win. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And yeah, please reach out to Eric or I to talk about any of these topics that you've heard about today. We love talking about it, and we'd like to speak to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So long.